the Solo Coach Podcast.
Good morning, Chris, and welcome to the Solo Coach Podcast.
Good morning, David. It's great to be here.
It's great to have you, and good morning, good afternoon, and good evening, and good night to everyone who's listening. Today, I am absolutely thrilled to welcome Chris Wilson to the show. So I met Chris on a netwalk in Roundhay Park last year. We immediately hit it off when we had a conversation about the importance of good communication skills. Chris is the founder of Speak and Serve, a company which enables business professionals to enhance their speaking and presentation skills. Chris is to thank for my guest appearance, subsequent membership of Leeds City Toastmasters. As a member of the York branch of Toastmasters, Chris is a huge advocate for the club and gave me a recommendation which I simply couldn't resist. So Chris, the floor is now all yours to tell us more about what it is that you do as the founder and owner of Speak and Serve.
Thank you, David, for that scintillating introduction. I just want to appreciate you, first of all, for taking action, because so many people say, yeah, that would be great. Thanks, Chris. But then they do nothing with it. But actually, you went out and went to the City Toastmasters. And I think the fact that you now do this is testimony to the fact that you are flexing your speaking muscle. And that's what I try to do, really. I believe that we all have a voice and it can create huge amount of impact and influence. And when we connect with a message, it's like a ripple that goes out and you never know where that little ripple's going to land. But if your message is worth sharing, then somebody needs to hear it. And that's my job, to try to enable you to land your voice with impact and influence.
Wow. Thank you, Chris. Very well said, as always. So what's your role then as a coach specializing in speaking and presentation skills? How does that work?
Well, you'll know that a coach in an ICF or an ILM model, technically speaking, asks good questions. And I'll always do that. But I think the slight differentiation is that I also put on sometimes a mentor hat and a trainer hat, because people come to me not just because they want to be coached, but they want to elevate their skill set. So sometimes they're wanting to improve their sales nuance. Sometimes it's their connection online or in person, or sometimes they just need to get hold of the beast in the room and diminish their anxiety around speaking. So every conversation is different. I will be a coach, but there's also an aspect of enabling and improving, teaching, training, and serving them.
And what led you to setting up Speak and Serve to deliver this service?
Well, I've always had servitude in me, from the 14-year-old dishwasher in a Beefeater steakhouse to then going on to hotel general managership. My last paid job was 27 years ago as a Marriott hotel general manager. And that is in me to my heart. I like to serve people. I like to find people and leave them hopefully better as a result of our interaction. I was actually walking down a beach in Anglesey, May bank holiday last year, and the waves were crashing, the seagulls were squawking, and the wind was rustling through my hair, and I wasn't quite present. And my partner sort of turned to me and she said, "You're not even here, are you?" And I said, "No, I've been kind of doing this midlife men stuff, and I just don't know whether it's my calling, and I think that there's a better place for me." And she sort of said, "Well, what are you going to do?" And literally, David, I picked up a stick that was on the beach and I drew a line in the sand. And I said, "I'm going to tell you when we cross over that line." And physically, I took her hand and we walked over the line. And I said, "I've been doing this speaking thing in Toastmasters. And without bigging myself up, I'm winning competitions and I seem to be okay at it. And I absolutely love it. And I used to do this sales thing with telemarketing. And I think there's a skill there where I can bring my sales and my speaking together with service. And this thing called Speak and Serve is in my head." And she said, "Well, what's stopping you?" And I went, "Nothing." And that's what happened. Literally, this time last year, I pivoted completely, but I still use some of my midlife men learning about resilience, mental health, sleep, enjoyment, relaxation to work with an individual, not just sometimes on their speaking, but also how to center themselves on being the best version of themselves.
And before we come on to that midlife knowledge that you mentioned there, where does your love of doing what you do come from?
What an interesting question.
Because there's a clear passion there. I'm really feeling it as you speak. And when we met, you sort of blew me away with your passion for speaking, communication skills, listening, helping people to express themselves more.
Mm. I think my answer to that is in actually adversity. I lost my mum when I was 25 and she was 53. And she always fills me with the same message, which is today, tomorrow is tomorrow. Never regret tomorrow what you not you achieve or do today. And I very much believe that we should be a light in every room. And when we are a light in a room, it brings positivity and inspiration and sometimes knowledge to others. And that's just my reason for being, whether it be my kids, whether it be my partner, whether it be meeting somebody like you, David, is to how do I find what's their emotion, their feeling, their calling, their passion, and just try to push them a little bit to move into their uncomfortable self. But then when they find that they've conquered that, just let them go. And that's where I love to work, just to enable humanity to be better than they were yesterday.
I agree entirely. There's something so magical about empowering people and then doing ourselves out of a job as a good coach. I realized recently that was what I did throughout my career in IT as well, because that was what we were all aiming for, was to do our job so well that we were no longer needed, do ourselves out of a job. And I feel that passion for coming through. I feel you channeling it through the screen. And I'm curious as to, have you always been a light in a room? Have you always been a masterful speaker, or has it been something that you've had to work on and develop over the years?
Well, calling me a masterful speaker, David, is definitely flattering my ego, but I still believe that there's many, many levels to go to. And I never rest on complacency thinking in an arrogant way, I'm there or I've done it, because I always think that there's better places to go to rather than just resting on your laurels. I don't think I would always be a masterful speaker, but I really enjoy the interaction of discussion, conversation, being in a room. And that's part of my coaching methodology, is that people rest on text messages, emails, LinkedIn messaging, funnels. Actually, we were built as humans to interact around fires, be out in the wild, talking, sharing stories of mishaps and fights or flights. But we seem to be losing the importance of connection. And I know we're talking this week, which is Mental Health Awareness Week and month, and the theme is communities. And I think somehow with AI and technology, virtual, we're losing the ability to connect as two people, as people. And my calling really on coaching is to elevate the importance of conversation and connection, because that's what makes us human.
Yeah, I'd like to ask you more about that, Chris, because I've noticed over the last 10 years, as I've been going through my 20s and now my very early 30s, that there's sort of this people want to have face-to-face and telephone conversations much less. When I started working in IT, people would enjoy ringing me on a regular basis with their problems, and then I noticed over the last 10 years, people prefer to email or log a ticket or send a message on social media, and people would do everything else first, and actually calling or calling in and having a face-to-face conversation would be their last resort. And I'd I know friends who I speak to and say, why don't you just ring the company and then they'll sort you out? And they'll say, oh, no, I'll email first. And then they go through a painful, arduous email chain process because they hate the thought of having to call. What's going on there?
Well, there's a sentence that says the brain knows what it likes and it likes what it knows. And when you've done that telephone call where somebody has beaten you down and told you to go away, go forth politely, it hurts when you get that rejection. And then the brain goes, oh, David, don't ring them again because you could get battered down or they might tell you to go away politely. Why didn't you just send them a nice email? Because then that sort of lands safely. And that's the psychology of humanity, is that when we go into something that hurts us physically or emotionally, the brain says, don't do that again because that hurt you. And I think that makes us fall to comfortable patterns of texting or emailing as opposed to going for the no or going for the yes. If you get the no, at least you're not going to be in email ghosting land where nobody replies. And you can go and find the people that do want to be in your tribe, that do want to be your client base. Pick up the phone, ask the question, go and have a meeting and just say, David, we've been talking for 2 months about potentially moving forward. Where are we at?
Mm.
And they could say, it's a great piece of feedback. Actually, something in your message, your delivery, or your persona just didn't quite work for me. Interesting. And rather than the ego going, how dare you, ask the ego to say, how can we find some value from that? David, that's a really good insight. First of all, thank you so much. Where did I go wrong? Which part of my messaging didn't land in the way that perhaps my marketing expectation said it would? Well, it's when you sat down and told me the coffee and you hit me with a price and you just led with price first before you talked about value. Okay. And even from a no, you can still get value that can create a yes in the future.
Mm. And what do you feel the cost therefore is of perpetually avoiding, difficult or potentially awkward, challenging, triggering face-to-face communication and going on a pure social media, email, electronic, non-face-to-face communication method?
Well, first of all, I'm not suggesting that it's not a good methodology because the top of the funnel is all about attention and attraction. And sometimes you need to get people's attention, which could be through a post, it could be through a good LinkedIn message, it could be through a video on Insta. But at some stage, we need to bring the client into a position where we say yes or no. So the cost of relying on perhaps a written narrative, the cost is that that client could go somewhere else that's not as good as you are. The cost is that they stay where they are because they don't trust themselves, and the coach could enable that person to be better. So the cost is really you're not serving the clients that need your service.
Hmm. I see. So and then flipping that question on its head, what's the value that you've seen of working with people to improve their speaking and presentation skills?
Well, it's about connection. And equally, if you are in that land where you've sent out 30 emails and it's silence, it doesn't make you feel good because you've got rejection, rejection, rejection. The mind dopamine says, I've sent out 30 emails. Aren't I amazing today? Look at me. I've done such a good job. And then the mind's looking for the dopamine circle to be transferred with success. And when nothing happens, the mind goes, well, David, you're an abject failure. You sent out 30 emails and none of them worked. I had this last week with a lady, I'll call her Sharon, and she sent out 10 emails that we crafted, used a little bit of AI to work on the context. And of course, 10 emails went out and they were all not responded. And I said, Sharon, just thinking last week, you were really, really busy. What was your methodology in your email? What was your number one objective? Delete, 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 delete. I wanted housekeeping on my email box. Well, what's to say that any of your clients I'm not thinking the same thing. Your email is just a line of text that they're wanting to delete. Let's go harder and let's go different. How can we improve the communication? Well, I might ring them. Try that. 10 phone calls later, 3 responses, 1 conversation leading to a prospecting. We've gone from 100% failure to 30% attention to 10% success.
I'm laughing as it once again it comes back to the old ways are often still the best ways. The amount of times I speak to people with new businesses and they're saying to me, I think I need to work on my SEO and my search engine optimization, and I'm thinking, but you haven't got any clients yet, or you've only got 1 or 2 clients, and what about the value of going out and meeting people, or like you say, calling them? It seems so obvious, it seems traditional and old-fashioned in a way, but how is getting ranked a little bit higher in a Google search going to help someone who hasn't yet had any clients and just wants to build up their portfolio and their practice, versus going and picking up the phone, having a face-to-face conversation, but facing that enormously scary prospect that I faced last year of asking people for money for what I do for a living?
Well, time is money, David, at the end of the day. And I am certainly not here saying that SEO, Google Ads, or all those metrics to try to get attention are not worth looking at. I will do them myself and I will spend time on my SEO, my Google Ads, and my Google reviews. But remember, the top of the funnel is where we need to get people's eyes and ears on us, which is attention. That's the number one game in marketing, to get attention. And then we need to serve them, hopefully, with something, which I say we need to attract them in to make them feel as like, I trust, or I'm curious, or I'm intrigued by David's message. And that's the marketing piece done. We've got their attention, we've attracted them to us. And now we need to work on selling, was we need to have an aspiration of how we're going to work together towards a compelling future, which makes them take action. That's my 4A framework: attention, attraction, aspiration, and action. And my belief is that the aspiration and action bit can only really come from a conversation, because I ask you a question, I listen to your response, and then I dovetail my offer based on what you've asked for. And then you go, this person absolutely gets me. He understands what I'm looking for. He's given me a roadmap for the future that is about the successful journey that I'm trying to maneuver through. I'm compelled to take action. And you can only do that, I think, in a two-way communication process where you are asking a question, you listen to their reply, and then you react based on what they've just said.
It's so interesting, Chris, that everything you said there sounded so bespoke and custom to the client and the person in front of you. And you didn't mention pricing, closing the sale. You didn't mention any of the terms that I'm used to hearing about when I look at sales strategy documents.
Well, that's my framework is speak and serve. So if we serve the prospect with what they're looking to achieve, then the investment, I talk about investment as opposed to cost or price, the investment hopefully becomes less of an object that has to be achieved, because they're already excited about where the future is taking them. They trust themselves, and hopefully they also trust in you, that that's the way that they're going to go. Because often you've been burnt in the past. They've been triggered by another funnel or a tactic or a shiny tool in the past. It says, this is the thing, David, this is going to be the thing that's going to make you the best person ever. And then you get the program and you go to the first 2 modules and just go, I've been done again. And then they begin to trust themselves about whether or not this new coach, this new framework, this new marketing package course is actually the thing that's going to take them from unknown to known, or from failure to success.
What you mentioned there, going from failure to success, I wonder if I could ask you a little, scrape more into that with you, as the word failure has been bouncing around in my head as we've been speaking. As for me, my biggest fear of pitching myself, selling myself, and even going to Toastmasters for the first time was a fear of totally and utterly, catastrophically failing. You smiling as I speak, as I'm sure this is something you speak about with your clients on a regular basis. I wonder if you can talk to us more about failure and how you help people overcome that,
All
or how
right.
you've overcome it.
We'll take the listeners and the watchers back to David, probably 14-month-old David, crawling around the floor of the lounge, suddenly finding a stool to grab hold of and teeter on his feet. And then he takes his first few steps, and as an abject failure, he smashes to the floor, and your parents go, David, you're a failure. Stay down there, you miserable little runt. Don't think they did that. And equally, your own evolution said, that was interesting. I tried to balance a little bit. I went a bit too far forward on my weight and I fell over. But what do? You pick yourself up, you learn from your failure, and you go again. That is the confidence competency loop. We try, we fail, we learn, and we go again. So my philosophy is failure and success are on the same side of the equation because you get lessons from both. But if you're not trying, that is on the left-hand side of the equation, which is going to take you backwards. So yes, you can fail, but take the lessons from the failure, park the ego and say, congratulate me for trying, help me learn from failure. But don't let failure stifle your progress to carry on evolving as a human.
I've heard the phrases thrown around: fail often, fail fast, and fail forward spoken about, and some of them sound a little bit cliched or a little cringeworthy, but there's so much truth in, you know, I find it in business, going and speaking to people, failing lots of times to sell myself, but then on the 10th attempt, I'm incrementally quite a bit better, and my pitch then is good enough for someone to say yes. But if I wouldn't have gone through all of the failures first, I might never have actually reached the yes at the end of a stream of no's.
And you'll probably find people in your world, and you'll come across people that have had a redundancy, they've been let go, they've even had sometimes a massive life interruption, health scare of some sort. And it's those points where you physically have to jump off the cliff and find your wings that you'll find real growth and real purpose. And I think, again, that's from my perspective, as humans, we stay comfortable because the fear of change or the fear of, well, what if it doesn't work, makes us stay rested in perhaps jobs we don't like, people that don't serve us, and environments that are unhealthy. Because the change that is associated with making that leap of faith is just too scary sometimes to contemplate.
Yes, exactly. I know one of the reasons we've connected and had this conversation today, I heard you on a podcast not that long ago. I was listening to it on a plane. I was deeply moved by it. And you were talking about some of your experiences in life and how you've faced complete failure and then picked yourself back up and got up again and tried again. And it took me back to when I shared with you about how I felt when I was dropping out of university. And that's the biggest failure I've had in life, and the most like a complete and utter 100% failure that I've ever felt. But ironically, the breaking of me was actually the making of me, because that was the first time in my life I broke away from the path I was on and I pivoted and I chose my own path. So it was powerful and transformational, but my God, it was a horrible, dark and depressing time, which I sometimes feel still influences me today and what I do, with a knowledge of how much being on the wrong path hurt and how bad I felt when I had to change paths.
I think on many occasions, David, we follow paths because of societal norms, beliefs, pressures, or expectations from peer or from people that are important to us. And your decision to take a step away from that path was such a brave move. But the longer you stay in a path that is actually not congruent to how you feel is very harming, I think, for people, because the body knows the truth, the mind keeps the score. And I'm sure people will be feeling that when they're in a situation that they feel is natural to themselves, there's little voices that go, why are you doing this? Who is this person that you're trying to be? It's not the true David. And the longer you try to suppress that, the worse the voice gets. It speaks louder and louder. And then when you say, right, big, big boys blouse on, let's just crack on and do it, then the body just goes, ah, hallelujah, we're free. And this energy and this motion just starts to unravel. But of course, the voice of doubt suddenly comes in maybe 6 months later, where you might have found yourself to go, I wonder what would have happened if we just stayed back there and pursued that university path. Are you sure you're in the right path here, David? And that's just the little inner voice there that is to center you, to challenge you, and to ask you, how much do you really want this?
Exactly, Chris. And I think the reason it was so difficult looking back was because on the subject of communication, I couldn't communicate how I was feeling to my friends and family because I couldn't even communicate and understand it myself. I knew I was lost, stuck, and trapped and on the wrong path, but I couldn't put it into words. I couldn't articulate it. I couldn't share it. All I could tell you was that I was on the wrong path and I didn't feel right and I was really unhappy. So what, you describe it as an act of bravery. At the time, it felt like an act of complete and utter stupidity for just not knowing what else to do.
But where does that stupidity come from? Who was making you feel as though this road that you're on is the right road to be on?
I felt it was what I'd built up my whole life, my whole 19 years by that point had been building towards that point, being there, being a student, and hopefully becoming a graduate one day, and then being a professional with a degree. And so much of my life had been based around that as my main goal and what I thought was my vision, that when I found myself on that journey feeling really lost and like I was very much on the wrong path, I crushed under the weight of what I felt was societal expectations and also sort of family and self-created pressures and expectations.
Mm. I don't want to get too much into how we construct the world that we live in, but you look at education, it's built for the masses. And if you're in the middle group, it's great. But if you're a high flyer, you may well be stifled. And if you've got a particular special need or a learning deficiency, you're probably going to find yourself floundering. And then the expectation is that you are going to go to some graduate college or go to university. And the system is built for us all to follow along the same wave. And if everybody was mavericks and didn't follow that, we'd be stuffed because we'd have no managers, we'd have no CEOs. The capitalist culture of creating wealth for the few and not so much wealth for the many, the machine would break. But just take a step back and see, are you part of a machine that you're in a washing machine cycle that's going round and round and round? And if you are, take a step back and think, what can I do to change? I don't want to get everybody to suddenly change their employment or change their jobs, but can you do something on the side that serves you better as purpose? Could you volunteer? Could you change your revenue structure so that you are still safe, but fulfilling your purpose perhaps in a way that makes you feel you have more contribution?
Mm. So it's becoming more aware that there are other options and then considering taking one of them or taking a leap of faith and trying one out and seeing how it feels and seeing what you find out and figure out, and maybe failing a few times along the way.
Well, from a psychological perspective, when you're in your formative years of a young child or as a young teenager, you have nothing other than the world that you're brought up in to believe that this is the way that the world works. And if you look at case studies of crime, sometimes you'll find adolescent youths or even young males or females pursuing a path of crime, benefits, whatever that might be, because that's just the way they were brought up. And suddenly they might go into a jail system, or they may find themselves retribution because of doing something wrong. And they suddenly realize that this isn't the way the world works. There's other ways to make money, make contribution, or become a part of humanity. But that's just the way that they were told the system works. And it's only when you break out perhaps of your teenage years and then see that the way that you were brought up in education or your parents or other peers, that you think, oh, there's another path that I didn't even know existed. And that's when the curiosity starts to build sometimes, because you see possibility of travel, cultures, ethnicities, religions, mindset, frameworks, to see that there's more than actually the way that your household or educational framework told you that this is the way you operate.
Mm. And when you started your business, was that something that came like in an overnight like spiritual awakening of sorts? Or was it something that had been building for a while and you'd had a knowledge that there's another way, there's another option, there's another path for me, and gradually that seed sort of grew into an idea? Or was it a big bang?
I think it's been an evolution, David, over time. And let me be clear to the listeners, I am a victim or a prodigy of my own failures to a certain degree. And the two words that absolutely riddled me were shame and guilt. Shame for pursuing a business that worked and then literally hit the rails and had to be closed. For me, with a slightly self-centered ego that I'm very aware of, that was really damaging and hurt me in a very, very self-conscious way. And guilt then associated with some of the outputs of that. I had to sit with those two words for far too long. And actually, as you know from a previous podcast, it nearly meant that I decided to turn the lights off in my world. So I'm not sitting here saying that I am the perfect epitome of a human. I am very aware that I can slip and I can fall into places that can be still quite self-persecuting.
Thank you for sharing, Chris. And how does your awareness of the places that you could slip and fall into enable you to consciously avoid slipping and falling into those spaces?
For me, it's knowledge of self. I'm very aware of what I do have a very good and sometimes damaging ego that wants to seek affirmation, that wants to be recognized. And doing something like this now as a podcast, my ego sit here called Clyde is going, this is great, this is good, we're getting to share our messages. And I have to be very aware sometimes that he can take me to places and do things that actually might not be the right outcome for what I'm trying to achieve. So for me, I journal a lot. So this is my current journal. I've got stacks and stacks of them, and I will journal every day around thoughts and mindsets. And that is a really good way I talk about is thinking in ink. And when you can pour your thoughts down into paper, you begin to see patterns of places where perhaps your ego is asking you to hunt. And then you say, actually, I don't think this is the right path. So it's a real discovery of self-awareness of what your ego perhaps wants to achieve and whether or not that's the right path for what you're trying to achieve for yourself or for the people that matter to you.
And how does someone listening that or like myself, who hasn't done much work with ego, and it's quite a new term, I have an awareness of it, but how do I differentiate me, authentic, real me, from my ego, my Clive?
There's a lovely YouTube, if you want to go to it, TED Talk by Sir Ken Robinson, and it is all about finding your purpose. And if you've got some time, I would really empower you to go and look that up, because it just really asks you salient questions about what is your why. And obviously it's Simon Sinek's, find your why, but there is something in you probably that is the reason why you operate, and what gives you strength, power, motivation, and belief. So spend some time thinking, what is my contribution? And it's one of our core human needs, feeling as though you have a contribution to the world. When you feel you have contribution and you're giving something that's relevant, it makes you feel valued. But are you seeking affirmation on your ego because of those peer groups, those societal norms, those parents, those role models that are telling you, you must do this because it ticks these boxes? Or are you pursuing it because it's your path, that's your passion?
And how does it feel? How did it feel for you when you did find your right path for the right reasons that you're on now?
I say it's like Christmas morning every day. I literally wake up and I put my feet on the floor. First of all, I say thank you, because the ability to wake up, put your feet on the floor and stand up is something that I think we should be grateful for every single day. And we maybe take that for granted. And then I look at the diary and go, let's go. I've got a conversation with David today. I've got a 3 o'clock session with my peer group to talk about the power of written words. I've got a discovery call with Sharon about overcoming her speaker anxiety. And it just says there's 7, 8 humans today that could be stuck. And I might just be the catalyst to get them unstuck. What's not to like about that?
Absolutely. And to everyone listening, meeting Chris, when you meet him, it is like it's Christmas Day for him, as you are such a ball of positive energy, but directed positive energy. And you've been incredibly supportive to me on my journey, and you got me into a room I didn't even know existed, never mind knew that straight away as soon as I walked in. Yes, this is the space for me. This is exactly where I need to be for my business right now. And so moving on sort of practically to what you do, what can someone who's listening do then to improve their speaking and presentation skills?
Simple. Do more of it.
Practice.
It sounds cliche, doesn't it? But like anything, whether it be walking, running, cycling, swimming, writing, the more you do of it, the better you will be at it. Having said that, you can also use external influences, whether that be YouTube, a coach, books, to try to be better at it, because you can progress in your own way, or you can take quantum leaps by picking the value out from other people that might be ahead of you. So if you can work with a coach, obviously I'm available, but if you can work with somebody that can enable you to be a better speaker, then that would be good. Get feedback would be a really important, salient part of that. And as we've already talked about, go to places where speaking is the norm. Toastmasters, Professional Speaking Association, impromptu sessions. Put yourself out there and volunteer to speak. If you want to do it silently, 3 simple methodologies. Go to your phone and speak to your phone, record it, video and audio. Look back at it with just the video playing, so you see your little nuances, tips, tweaks, the times that you scratch your head, play with your chin, or scratch your bum, whatever it is. You'll have little habits that you'll do without knowing. And then turn the video off and listen. And then you'll hear those ums, ahs, pauses, excitements, times when your tonality changes, your pace increases. You'll hear that. And then put it all together. And then maybe take a transcript. take the transcript, chuck it into an AI model such as Claude or ChatGPT, and say, this is my elevator pitch on becoming a better coach. Act as me as a brilliant speaker, find areas where you could improve, have more connection, or just resonate better with a call to action. And you'd be amazed what that tool is going to do for you. And just keep on doing that if you have to work on your own.
Thanks, Chris. Like you say, practice makes perfect, but practice with feedback. Because I always remember my piano teacher saying that practice reinforces bad habits. And I once played my rendition. Anyone that's heard me play the piano knows my go-to song is The Entertainer. I've probably played it 50,000 times in my life. But when I first played it to my piano teacher, she said, that's the most horrible rendition of The Entertainer I've ever heard. Where on earth did you learn that? Because it was out of time, it was out of key, it was out of tone. It was dreadful, but I just reinforced it so I could play it with literally stood up with my eyes closed. I could play it, but I wasn't playing it right. So I think it's essential, like you say, to have the feedback there and to otherwise potentially just reinforce bad habits. And then
just on that, when you said I wasn't playing it right, from whose perspective? That's her perspective as to how she listened to what she feels the entertainer piece could be. And I'll say to somebody, feedback is a gift. It's up to you whether or not you want to unwrap it, but never run away from feedback because that's an opportunity to learn. But not all feedback will be relevant to what you actually want to achieve. I could look at a Picasso or an abstract piece of art and I'll look at it and think, well, that's not very good. It's a blue circle on a square piece of paper that's white. Interesting. Another person could see it and go, oh, look at the depth of the blue circle. It's like a moon translucent on a blue sea on a white piece of cloud. Oh, I can really see what the artist was trying to achieve with that. And that's the beauty of learning. We all see, hear, and feel things based on the way it lands in our own brain. But it's not to say that what we feel, see, or hear would be the same as the next person.
Absolutely. I just come off a coaching course this week, and they were the lecturer was saying that all models are wrong, but some of them are useful because in terms of when you try and put people into boxes using human psychology models, people don't really fit into boxes because the human condition is much more complex than a model you could fit onto an A4 sheet of paper. So feedback is always useful, but it's not necessarily black or white. It's how someone feels that you could improve. And we've spoken about this a lot, haven't we, Chris, in the context of Toastmasters, how feedback, it can be really useful, but sometimes some people just won't necessarily like the way you speak because it's not to their taste.
Yeah. And also again, putting the ego back into the room here, if I saw something or somebody came to me with a conflicting problem and they say, oh, you never guess what's happened today, David. No, this happened, this happened, this happened. My ego says, oh, I have to fix that. I have to be the hero. And sometimes I'll say, that's interesting, David. What role would you like me to play here? Would you like me to listen? Would you like me to coach? Or would you like me to advise? And sometimes they just say, I just wanted you to listen. I just needed to download it because when I hear it come out of my own head, I get clarity. Okay. What are you going to do next? But often we want to put the hero cape on and fix the problem like a superhero. And actually the person goes, I actually didn't need you to help me. Oh. And that's where, again, you get conflict because we haven't taken time to understand. And one of my mantras is always seek first to understand before you can be understood.
It's sort of the irony of what you do, isn't it, Chris? I've noticed every time I've asked you about speaking and presentation skills, I'm dying to say speaking and listening skills. As I know as a coach that my favorite coaching activity I did in all of my training, they said, right, you're going to go into breakout rooms, pairs of two, one person speaks for 15 minutes, the other one, you can nod, but you make no noise with your mouth. Your mouth stays closed. So you had to stay silently listening. When you're in the listening role, it took forever. You felt like, oh my goodness, I'm not doing enough. I'm not helping. I feel daft. This is ridiculous. for the person speaking, it's like the biggest gift you are ever given, because it's the gift to just speak while someone listens intently with a guarantee that they absolutely will not interrupt you, because that's the only way they can fail, is to interrupt. It's magical. And that 15 minutes flies by. Like when you pause on stage to think about something because you've forgotten your script. Oh my goodness, this feels like it's been 10 minutes. People listening, it's been 5 seconds. It's just gone. And it's that perspective of time, whether you're the one speaking or listening, is it's huge. It's yeah.
Yeah,
What
and
would you say on
people,
that?
just to reflect on that point, I think people also like honest vulnerability. And if you are speaking and you lose your way, you just go, do you know, 55-year-old stupid self, I've just completely lost my thought here. Now, does anybody want to help me where I just was and where you think I'm going here? As opposed to just floundering on and making an absolute pile of mess out of it. Because then the ego goes, oh, here you go again, David. You completely lost the room here. Yep, just carry on and talking a load of bull. And he's just going to be, yep, that's it. That was a sentence. And you just go, oh, let me shrink and find a hole in the stage here to fall through. So be very aware of your ego. Uh, and I've forgotten where we went down, was where your question was. But I think it was about listening, was it? Listening is a two-contact sport.
Exactly. And I saw a meme this morning on Instagram that said opening a browser tab on your browser and forgetting why you opened it is the modern equivalent of going into a room, turning the light on and wondering why you went in there. And it's totally true. And you see speakers, Toastmasters, new people, you see them, they go up on stage, they start to talk about something and then they suddenly stop and then they crash and they say, I'm sorry, I need to sit down now. And you think you were doing so well, and you can literally almost see when the ego takes over and goes to them, you are a living, walking, talking joke. You are embarrassing yourself, and everyone in this whole room thinks you're an idiot. Do us all a favor and sit down. And you can see it happen. And it's heartbreaking when it happens because they were doing so well. They weren't any of those things. And yeah, coming back to failure, leaning into that for me has been terrifically powerful. But there's so much more work left to do.
There is, and there's a lovely phrase. I nicked it from somebody else. It's not my own, but they say that there's a butler in your mind. Allow the butler time to serve you with what's in there, because he or she will find the knowledge, the thoughts, the memory, the activity that you want to talk about. But rushing the butler will mean that they'll drop the tray and spill the coffee or whatever food that they are bringing to you. So just allow the butler time to pick out all the parts that are in your 55, 42, 18 years of life and bring it to the surface. But don't rush him or her, because they'll probably fall over.
I love that analogy, Chris, and that probably is what I learned to do over a whole year of solo travel was notice that the butler exists and actually hear what the butler has been trying to say to me, rather than just masking it, suppressing it, silencing it, and just forcing my way through life and wondering why I ended up tired out, burnt out, and completely unfulfilled. It was through no fault of anybody else's, and I don't blame anyone or any entity. It was through the fault of me completely ignoring the butler, that voice inside.
Good.
So isn't it all right? We've come all the way back to communication. The best thing you can do to improve your communication is improve your self-awareness and your communication with yourself.
Yeah, the conversations with yourself, I think, are the ones that are most important, but also be aware of the destructive nature of sometimes the conversations with yourself. And you can only see the consequences of that through end of life decisions that people take, or addictions to harmful substances. Often the reasons why is because the conversations that are happening in people's heads are just too painful or too overpowering, that they just need to wait to silence the noise.
Mm. So if someone's listening, Chris, and they are thinking, wow, I can relate to everything that Chris and David have been saying, and they want to improve their relationship with their inner narrative, that inner critic, and they want to improve their relationship with fear, how they feel about fear, and understand what the hell their ego is, what their inner butler is, and how to bring it all into alignment and congruence so that they can communicate better with themselves and also the outer world. Where can they find you and how can they get in touch?
Simple website, speaktoserveandsell.co.uk or .com. LinkedIn, you'll hopefully find me, Chris Wilson. There's lots of Chris Wilsons, but if you put Chris Wilson Speak and Serve, you'll find me that way. Those would be the two best platforms to get me on. And on the website, there's a few little ebooks in there that enable you. There's also YouTube, Speak and Serve, and my podcast is Prime Your Life.
I'll put links to all of those in the show notes. I definitely recommend checking out Chris's YouTube channel. Super front-loaded, valuable content that's helped me no end with my speaking and listening for my business and also for Toastmasters. And all that's left to say from me, Chris, is thank you so much for coming on. I feel we could have gone all day, but I am so fired up now for my day. So thank you for everything that you've shared. It's been a true honor.
Well, I want to congratulate you and appreciate you, David, for the journey that you are on and have leaned into, because it's probably only a year ago that we had that conversation at Meanwood. And since then, you developed your coaching rationale and also you have leaned into, what's this episode now? 9, 10? I don't know how many episodes you've done.
This will probably be episode 17.
There you go, episode 17. Who knew that this time last year you would be on 17 episodes of recorded conversations? And I bet you've become better as a person as a result of it.
Absolutely. And one of the best parts of doing what I do now, of going into business, is meeting people like yourself who have faced what I call a dark night of the soul and have lent into those feelings and that struggle and that difficulty, and then decided, I'm not going to let this break me. This is going to make me, and have followed their heart, their own path, and been brave, and followed the path less followed, taken the path less followed, and are now thriving as a result. And playing to all your strengths, with an acknowledgement that you're still a work in progress, as are we all. And there's just every day's a school day.
Well, I'll reflect it back at you, David Garwood. You are also a talisman of other people's motivation. Carry on serving and you'll be helping so many people in the future.
Thank you, Chris.
The Solo Coach Podcast.